Without further ado, I now invite the moderator for the panels, Mr. Yuambari Haihuhe, who is the Deputy Director, Partnerships and Policy, to moderate the first panel for this morning. Thank you.
Okay, good morning, everyone. Good to see those faces from yesterday joining us for day 2 of our seminar. And for those that are new, thank you for joining us and making time in your schedules to attend this important event so that we can share information about what can be done to improve the conduct of elections in PNG. You will note the theme of this event is strengthening elections integrity through promotion of transparency. And these are important words because they speak to what can be done. TIPNG is an optimistic organization. You would have seen from the report that was presented yesterday and the findings that some of the information indicates that we have less than desirable outcomes within our electoral process. That should not be the end point, but should be the starting point for discussion and action. So that's the tone of the panels that we have. And we have overly qualified panelists that will be able to speak to some of the issues that we've discussed yesterday. So without further ado, I'll invite each of our panelists in turn to come up. And as they make their way to the stage, I'd ask if you could welcome them with a round of applause. So firstly, we have Ms. Alice Gugnau from the PNG Electoral Commission. She's the acting director in charge of the Information and Civic Awareness Branch. Please make Alice welcome. Okay, our second panelist for this morning's session on transparency in the elections is the president for the Media Council of PNG, Mr. Neville Choi. If you could please make Mr. Choi welcome. You can sit down. Okay, our third panelist is Mr. Glenn Vito. He's the Digital Infrastructure and Shared Services Manager with the Department of Information, Communication and Technology. Please make Glenn welcome. And then our final panelist for today is Ms. Mavis Tito. She's the Director for Caritas PNG. Please make Mavis welcome. So this is the panel that will be discussing transparency in our elections in light of TIPNG's Domestic Election Observation Report yesterday, as mentioned by Ariane. Looked at a number of systematic issues within our elections and some of the data that was collected by TIPNG's 340 observers across 20 provinces. In the recommendations of the report, TIPNG called for greater transparency and integrity. And we called specifically on the Parliamentary Committee, Special Parliamentary Committee on Elections. We called on the Interdepartmental Electoral Committee and the PNG Electoral Commission to take those transparency and integrity initiatives as part of the reform process that's been started. This panel discussion is an open panel discussion. We will have questions from those in the room, and we also have questions online. So if you are online, please do type in your questions and send it through. They'll be sent through to me to also ask our distinguished panelists. If you are, again, sharing about the event, please do use our social media hashtag, which is hashtag TIPNG elections. If you're posting about the event on Facebook or on Twitter, if you're watching online, you can also use the hashtag. Before I go into the panel, I think it's also important to outline the discussion topic of transparency. Why is it that transparency is being promoted as an intervention? For TIPNG, obviously, in our name, we have transparency. And when we say transparency at TIPNG, it consists of 3 things. So it's the provision of information, and that information has to be accurate. So it has to be actually the information relating to what's happening in the real world. It has to be accessible. So no point me asking you for something in English and you give it to me in Motu when I don't speak Motu. You have to give the information in an accessible way. This also pertains to digital transmission of data. If I ask you for information, you give it to me in a file format that my laptop can't read, it's not accessible. And then lastly, it has to be timely. So the information has to be provided in a time-bound manner. So if we're trying to make decisions about the next elections, we need the data from the 2022 elections to inform that discussion. So information has to be provided on time. So when TIPNG speaks about transparency, what we're asking for is the information that we need provided in an accessible manner, is it accurate, and is it timely? So the panelists that we have can speak to this credibly about the elections and contribute their ideas to how these reforms that we are considering can promote transparency in the work of elections. Without further ado, I'd like to open up with a question to you, Director Alice. In terms of the Electoral Commission, we had from the Electoral Commissioner yesterday about some of the achievements of the Electoral Commission during the 2022 elections, but he also spoke very candidly about some of the challenges that he had faced and also some of the difficulties in implementing the laws of the Electoral Commission. Within your branch, the Information and Civic Awareness branch, it's a key function. It communicates the work of the Electoral Commission. Could you outline for our audience today what is the work of the Information and Civic Awareness branch and how does it link up with the rest of the Electoral Commission? You can use my mic.
Good morning, everyone. Well, the introduction has been done. Thank you for that question. The work of the civic education and the Electoral Commission, we support the work of the election administration in terms of informing and educating the citizen of this country on the electoral process. We have the electoral cycle, which is an international standard, but we localize it to our context. So we have the election administration that comes up with the operational plan, and when they share that plan with us, we see where the needs are, and we develop and we consult with our stakeholders on what information that needs to go out to the public, mainly the citizen. We have segment on the electoral process, so we inform the public on those different segments on the electoral process and procedures.
And you mentioned the electoral processes, the electoral cycle. What is that cycle, and where does awareness fit in that cycle?
We have the electoral cycle where we have the pre-election, election proper, where the polling and the conduct of elections, and post-election. So the electoral cycle is a continuous cycle where when we develop our plans, we have to adjust on a timely basis where those information fits in. When we talk about pre-election, we talk about what needs to be done. We need to educate the citizen on how to get on the roll. What do they do in order for us to have our democratic right exercise during the election? We can't just go and ask the polling officials to vote. We need to have our names registered. So that process comes in the pre-election process.
And then in terms of during the elections and post-election, are there awareness components as well, or is it only pre-election?
The awareness is a continuous process from the pre-election right through the post-election. So it's a continuous cycle where awareness has to be done according to the international standard, but we localize it to our PNG context. And we adjust those information on a timely basis and on the resources that we have and allocated to us.
And then during the 2022 national general elections, what were some of those awareness messages and platforms that were used by the Electoral Commission?
In the 22 national elections, you may have heard all the challenges that we have, but with the limited resources that we have, we just go by the processes that we have. We did the awareness on the enrollment, where we encourage a lot of young youths to get themselves on the roll. Apart from that, we had the candidates information. We produced the kit for election candidates where they wanted to nominate, the qualifications and the criteria for the candidates. And from that, we went to the polling schedules, where people need to find polling schedules, where they need to go and vote, what are the criteria that they need to observe at all times. You know, you need to be on the roll, where your name is enrolled and where you are. You need to understand that to get to the polling station, you don't just go there when you know that you are there, but you need to have your name on the roll. So those are the information that we have, because we have information that was misinformed, and also we just adjust to whatever information we have and the information that is approved by the management.
Okay. And then I think you mentioned on enrollment, one of the innovative things that the EC did was to have a digital roll lookup. How was the reception to that? Did you find that it was used frequently?
For the digital roll lookup, we introduced that, but the timing was not sufficient for us to ensure that a lot of people tap into that. So really, it was good in a way that people who have smartphones that tap into that to check the names that they're on the roll. Most people think that that platform will provide that if you names that are there, you just go and vote. But really, you have to also check physically that your information and your details are correct as well. That platform really provide an avenue for us, but timing was not sufficient for us to do a lot of awareness. And one of the challenges in that platform was useful for people in the urban areas, but not in the remote places where most of the population live, and they cannot have access to those platforms.
Yes, but I think it was also an important partnership between the PNGEC and the Department of ICT. And I'd like to bring you in on the conversation at this point, Glenn. During the elections, what was the role of Department of Information and Department of Information and Communications Technology? And how did you work with the Electoral Commission to get that digital information out to those that needed it?
Thank you. So, from the department, when we've had a chance to engage with the Electoral Commission, I think, unfortunately, we came about a couple of weeks out from the elections. We couldn't do much in terms of supporting PNG Electoral Commission, but like we mentioned, there's already a way forward that we think we could assist. And one of those lessons learned from this current election was we need more collaborative efforts from everyone, not just a few months away from the elections. If we had to prepare for the next coming elections, we should start now, so that, you know, the department has the mandate right now to deploy technology solutions, and we're grateful that we've got engagement with vendor partners that can also support us and support the whole of government in terms of delivering digital transformation agendas for government.
And so with the specific assistance required by the Electoral Commission, where was the collaboration between your two agencies? Was it on the website, or was it on a specific activity, or was it as and when the need arose?
We came from two perspectives. One was, I think, to have information disseminated on one of the websites that was set up. And the other effort that we sort of did not follow through on was hosting of, I think, the election website from PNGEC, because that was already, there was already a commitment by PNGEC and a stakeholder in that as well. So we concentrated more on dissemination of information through that website, which was totally independent from PNGEC. That was more focused on election-related matters.
Okay. And then what were some of the lessons that you learned in terms of, I assume this was the first substantial engagement between your department and the PNG Electoral Commission. So what were some of the lessons that you learned in that interaction that you would like to carry forward?
There's a lot of lessons learned, especially with regards to disseminating the correct information to our citizens and to everyone else involved in the elections. Like we rightfully mentioned, dissemination of information in a sort of a fast way. Most of the information that was disseminated on social media were either not correct or were either not validated, or they were delayed by some time, where, for example, someone would post on a certain platform that this person was already sort of announced as a winning candidate, but we haven't validated that through PNGEC, and that caused a lot of instigated a lot of discussion, and thankfully we didn't escalate to more violent outcomes. But there was, you could see that the trend, is getting to a stage that it could escalate if we don't take control of disseminating validated information in a short period of time, and leveraging on the media fraternity as well as our other partnership is something that I think we should look into and then follow through with for the next elections.
And I note you say for the next elections, the digital government plan that the Department of ICT is spearheading has a significant commitment also to elections data, and is committed to maybe having something like a digital elections or e-elections. Given the lessons you've learned from 2022, do you still think that is feasible, or do we have to adjust our plans slightly?
I think it's feasible for us to make it happen, but it requires a lot of collaborative efforts from all stakeholders. It's not just the PNG Electoral Commission that we're talking about, but disseminating information through the media, as well as when we start talking about electronic voting, you start looking at partnerships that are having a digital identity for all citizens, and using platforms that's suitable for the rural and urban areas likewise. The solutions, technology solutions that's out there that can be utilized. There's experiences from other economies, other countries that have gone, developing countries that have similar situation as we do, and I think we can leverage on those lessons learned and come up with a plan and execute that plan accordingly with the collaborative effort from all stakeholders.
Yep. You mentioned the media several times in your remarks, and I think it's only appropriate to go to Neville at this point, and we're grateful for you joining us this morning, Neville. I know it's also been a hectic week for the media with some of the comments that have been coming around the role of media in society and how they communicate effectively. How do you feel the flow of information was during elections? Was it coming from the sources that was required, and was it being disseminated appropriately, or were there still challenges in that process?
Thanks, Yua, and thanks for having us on the panel. First of all, I think kudos to the work that Alice and the team and the PNGEC tried to pull off with their limited access to funding and resources and capacity. I think that's widely acknowledged. The media was brought in and announced by the PNGEC as a major partner for the elections. That wasn't really how it happened. I mean, there were supposed to be daily presses. That also resulted in them being ad hoc and just for presses. We came from 2017 where we had a...
And sorry, for presses, you mean press conferences?
Press conferences, daily press conferences by the Electoral Commissioner or those in the hierarchy. So comparing with 2017 when we had and of course the level of resources and capacity then may be different to what they are today, but there was a functioning media center through which all information was sent, collated data was able to be resourced there, and I think that was the expectation. We acknowledge that the late start to the preparation programs by the PNG-EC, but I think one of the challenges that we face daily in the media is validating information and competing with other unregistered, unvalidated resources out there who say that they're credible news sources. That was our main challenge. That's always the main challenge in our newsrooms daily. But during elections, it becomes more sensitive. And I think if we're looking at a way forward, the answer is trying to restrict leakages from the PNG-EC. There were instances of delays and gazettal notices that the media only found out through when they were disseminated through WhatsApp groups and loaded onto social media. That meant that we had to go through our back channels to try to validate these sources straight from either the Electoral Commissioner, who was kind enough through his busy schedule to always give us some time to address our concerns. But I think to strengthen areas of communication and media, during elections, our mainstream media are the sources that people follow, and I think the credibility of that remains. But when you have the challenge of as what my colleague from ICT mentioned, either delayed or unvalidated figures being posted, creating dissension among supporters, candidates, we can all do without that, and I think the key is tightening down on our information flow and making that more effective.
Do you think newsrooms were prepared for the elections and the unique challenges of the elections, or was it something that also was a bit unexpected in terms of how to engage with the electoral process and the electoral information? Are media personnel, do they have the capacity to report adequately on electoral processes, in your view?
Currently, I would say yes, but with every upcoming election, there are always new challenges. I mean, from campaigning in this past elections, there was more taken to social media than the past elections. There wasn't as much as dirt being thrown between candidates around this time around. I think more political parties had grown or had evolved in some way to present themselves on social media to the public, knowing that there is a following out there. But yes, capacity, I mean, we in the media found ourselves that we had to deal with some new instances of challenges in each of our newsrooms. For the first time, we acknowledged that some of our journalists or practicing media personnel may be supportive of political parties, and this is not through shady or unscrupulous means, but they're actually registered paid members of political parties. So what we've tried to manage during the elections and moving forward is restoring integrity in each of our newsrooms so that they actually come out and acknowledge that. And we did have that during the elections, so it was managed through our newsrooms, through access to the process, access to different political parties, stories, and things like that. So there are evolving challenges, and I think we are meeting those challenges in the media. There is an open line through all the editors through this process, and I think we do get knocked in our media, we do get knocked all the time, but we acknowledge that we are an important stakeholder of elections, and we stand ready to work with the PNG-EC and of course TIPNG in improving integrity, most of all. Thank you.
Thank you. I think also with your media council hat, I'd like to also ask you specifically as a voice mechanism for journalists in Papua New Guinea, are there some concrete asks that you would have for the electoral planning processes in terms of information dissemination? Have you done that kind of assessment about what are the key points of advocacy that media fraternity need to all agree on so that they can communicate them effectively to the Electoral Commission as a stakeholder and Department of ICT as a supporting agency? Have you got that wish list in mind, or is it something you're working on?
The wish list is based basically on having us as a partner early in the process. I mean, even before the plans for the pre-election awareness and information planning, all media organizations should be included as a partner. And I think transparency of information I think that's another key issue. If there's opacity at the top level where information or gazettal notices aren't made clear to the media, then how can we relay that to the populace and the voting public? And I think that's the key information that they need. And I think transparency of information and timely, accurate information. The risk are the leaks in information, and they pose an even bigger risk in the next elections if we don't plug them now.
And then speaking of the risk, I want to also delve into this social media issue or opportunity. How is the media landscape for elections in particular adapting to digital media, Facebook, Twitter, WhatsApp messages and groups? Has there been enough of a discussion to come up with best practices for these digital reporting platforms, or is this something that still needs to be developed in partnership with the agencies that are disseminating information? Do we have those best practices in place for the digital space and reporting?
You'll notice that there's, across all the media now, they're all multi-platform delivered. So the organizations have been moving with the times, and you'll notice that every media organization has an online presence, has a social media presence. Every newsroom has their own social media policies. There is the room for involvement also in that, evolution in that, because we want to make sure that credibility is maintained. I think that's what the key is. If there is no credibility, then we're no different from all the other unregistered media, social media platform users who claim to be news organizations in their own right.
I think credibility also points to public trust, and this was one of the key points that was emphasized in remarks by the chairman of the parliamentary committee yesterday, and also by the Electoral Commission and some of our speakers from the observer missions. I think it is the space where civil society, and I think maybe I'd like to bring you in on this point of discussion. There's a risk that maybe if we discuss the digital aspects of transparency, we'll miss out on what Alice said, that digital is often just for the urban minority and not for the rural majority. Was information getting out to the people of Papua New Guinea as you were conducting your work and engaging with the communities that Caritas PNG serves? Were people informed about elections? Did they have timely, accessible, accurate information?
Thank you, Yua. So maybe just a bit background on Caritas PNG. We are the Justice, Peace, Relief and Development Agency of the Catholic Bishops' Conference of PNG and Solomon Islands. So we are not just a civil society organization, but we are a faith-based organization. And we have been a proud partner of the PNG Electoral Commission for the past 5 or 6 national general elections. We weren't engaged in the 2017 national general elections, but yeah, the previous ones plus the 2022 national general elections. We have the advantage of the Catholic Church's network all the way to the rural areas. So where some of the government, presence is not evident, the churches are, and the Catholic Church is one of them. So that's one of the our strengths, which we utilize to support civic awareness of voter education for our rural majority. We all know the geographic complications of our country, and so information going to the extremes of our country can be very challenging. So what we would really appreciate from government institutions, in this case the PNG Electoral Commission, is receiving the right kind of information that's accurate and provided to us in a timely manner, so we can channel those messages through our network to those that cannot access it readily via other platforms such as the social media, newspapers, TV, and radio. And it's very difficult, but we do our best to get those messages across to our rural communities. So it's very vital to get those correct in the first instance, so they are equipped with the correct information rather than going back and forth trying to get the right information if it turns out to be not correct in the first place. From our experience, we've learned that the limited preferential voting is still new. A lot of our people still do not really understand what it is and how to apply it when it comes to actual voting. So that's something that we ensured was one of our key messages to our people, especially those in the rural areas. The enrollment process was, as we all know, was a problem. And we, of course, do not lay the blame entirely on the PNG Electoral Commission, considering the issues and challenges they have faced themselves. But, just encouraging them to start early. There are some things that we need funding to do, but there are others that really, if we have a good network and extending, collaboration and partnership with others, we can do that with limited funding and resources. So a lot of our people out there weren't able to vote because their names went on the roll. One thing I discovered myself as a voter was that when the polling stations and roll came out, it was late. But I realized that if you went to, within your electorate, there are different polling stations. You had to ensure you went to the one that you had first enrolled in while you resided there. If you went to another polling station within that electorate, your name would not be on the draw. And I think a lot of people experienced this and thought their names went on the roll at all, but their names were. Alice mentioned earlier about the voter lookup. I think it became a bit troublesome at the time of polling because I checked myself and my name was not on the roll, on that voter lookup roll. But then when I went to my actual polling station, my name was on the roll. So, all these things need to be got right before the actual time of polling. We also found out, received so many questions during our nationwide voter education program was to spell out clearly the differences between the roles and responsibilities of our members of parliament versus the public servants, or the public service delivery mechanism. A lot of our people out there, because our members have access to funds through the PSIPs and DSIPs, think or expect our members of parliament to be the ones dishing out money and services to the people in their respective electorates. And that's we all know that's completely incorrect. That is why the public service mechanism is there to be the actual arms and legs of the government. General good governance messages was also something that was lacking in the communities we visited. So the budgetary process, the implementation, and the reporting, different types of corruption. A lot of these instances are occurring, but our people still cannot detect or understand that simple acts of corruption are being committed, but go unnoticed and not reported. And also the rights and responsibilities of our citizens themselves. A lot of them, and some of us may share similar experiences, is that they don't really take the electoral process seriously and just don't bother taking part in the elections. So some deliberately just do not exercise see the importance of exercising their right to vote during the elections. I was in a remote community prior to the elections giving a talk, and I got a question from a teacher, a primary school teacher, about where his tax money goes to. He said he's always, every fortnight, his salary gets deducted and that tax, it shows on his payslip, but where it goes to and how it's used, he has no idea what happens to that. So I think there is a lot of need for basic information to disseminate to our people out in the rural areas. And I think for a lot of us who live in the towns and cities, we have access to those, but the majority of our population lives in the rural areas, and those are the ones that all of us here should be thinking of and sharing this vital information through our various means and channels.
Thank you for that comprehensive analysis of some of the issues that came to the fore during the 2022 elections. I think we have the benefit of a panel that has the capability to give you the content to speak to some of that information gaps that are in the country. So you have Electoral Commission that provides the information, the ICT that looks at infrastructure and media that simplifies the messaging and gets it out to as many people as possible. How can civil society work with these partners to get electoral information that you've identified needs to get out there? What's the kind of game plan that we should have as civil society to engage with the media, with the ICT department, and with PNGEC?
It was good to hear from Alice the mention of an operational plan that they have. We have been conducting some stakeholder consultations over the past month or two, and we ourselves have been challenged by the public about having a 5-year awareness, voter education awareness plan, and not just wait until the eve of the elections and then go out and start talking to our people. And so I think, that would be a good point to start, is that whatever the operational plan or 5-year operational plan that the PNGEC has, is to socialize that with all of us stakeholders. I said earlier, not everything costs money. There are some that we can use through our own internal resources and networks. So we, looking at that, we can use what the PNGEC has to develop ours and use that to conduct our own voter education or civic education activities, starting now till the next elections. I think this is a major lesson that all of us should have learned from the past and these recent elections, is that now is the time to start. As soon as the government is sworn in, now is the time to start and continue this very good work that a lot of us are doing up to the next general elections. Some of us have had the privilege to work with the various provincial election steering committees in the provinces. A lot of our Caritas coordinators in the provinces sit on those committees. Whilst we had a good working relationship with the majority of them, there were some that posed some challenges for us. So, having an open mind and understanding that this is, whilst the PNG Electoral Commission is the owner of this activity, we are all just supporting partners, and we are all working towards a common cause, which is, free, fair, and safe elections. In terms of the resources, some of us produced our own resources. I know TIPNG, Caritas PNG, and the Electoral Commission itself also produced materials. But I think, for the future, instead of the Electoral Commission would most definitely need to produce its own, but for other civil society partners, perhaps coming together early and brainstorming on what resources, what messages we want to get out there, of course with the endorsement of the PNG Electoral Commission. So the messages are uniform and the same, and when we all go out there, we're speaking the same language, rather than us producing our own and every other civil society organization producing their own. And these materials could be utilized by the media also. And I acknowledge at this juncture the Post Courier, who was kind enough to allocate some spots in their dailies for some of our materials to be put out there. So, just early engagement of all stakeholders, not just the civil society, but also the government departments, the ICT, all those that who could play a very important role in ensuring our electoral process is respected. We gain public confidence again, and just to run a good elections, the work has to start early and in collaboration with all like-minded institutions. With regards to our donor partners, and I acknowledge the tremendous support that not just Caritas but others who have received. And an appeal to the donors also, that if you are really concerned about the conduct of our elections and that they should be run, peacefully, in a free and fair way, then, and if you're really interested, then come on board early, rather than, again, wait, just like our government, till the last, the eve of elections, and then jump on board to support us. We welcome the support from the very start, so that it becomes institutionalized, our work becomes institutionalized and systematic, rather than a one-off kind of activity or program. And I stress that, of course, it's entirely the responsibility of the PNG Electoral Commission, but every one of us are concerned about good elections, free from violence, and all sorts of corruption, and ultimately ensuring that the right kind of people are elected into our parliament to serve us, the people, in return. Yep. Some civil society organizations also have website and social media platforms. So again, coordinating with the PNG Electoral Commission and others in sharing those information through our platforms, so for our audiences and also for those people who follow us. So that's one suggestion also. So apart from the newspaper and TV and radio mediums that are more specific, more targeted to the event settings, social media also. But again, going back to what I said earlier about just making sure the information is right, and it's timely, and can be shared with civil society or organizations that can use their networks to channel to the rural areas.
Thank you, Mavis. I think at that point, I'd also like to remind those in the room and those watching that we will be taking questions for this session. So if you do have any questions for any of our panelists, please take note. If you're watching online, feel free to type in your questions into the chat box. And if you're posting about the event on social media, again, our hashtag is #TIPNG elections. As we discuss with the panel, how can we promote information, I think one of the key points that keeps on coming up is the early start and the early planning, the early engagement. I'm glad to have in our audience, we have the Deputy Secretary for National Planning. Just this week, we also had the budget that was put through. I didn't have a chance to look at the Electoral Commission application, but I wanted to come to you, Alice, around that planning discussion. Does the Information and Civic Awareness branch, your branch, require more assistance, more focus within the planning process of the greater part of the elections, which often is focused on logistics and on the implementation of different parts of the electoral law? But the awareness component is often silent, and now we're at, let's say, year 1, and we're counting up till year 5 when the elections are delivered. Are there any specific budgeting or planning requirements that you, as a director of the branch, would like to draw government's attention to, or say, look, these areas where donors could support as well? Are there any specific asks that we have to bear in mind to support a 5-year awareness or engagement plan?
Yes, thank you. With the recent workshop that we had last week, maybe one of our plans that we would like to have support from the government and also our stakeholders is we would like to have a 3-year plan, and we would want to do a civic education where it covers not only electoral process but the entire process of the government and other issues on a 3-year basis. And then when it comes to the 4th year, we trim down to election process itself and education on voter awareness only. But the civic education that we would want and we are planning for is the approach that will take on board not only the electoral process but the rights of people and other areas that concern the citizen of this country leading up to the elections. And we also require a lot of all of government engagement, the partners that we already have. We want to revive that. We want to also equip our provincial electoral office with capacity building, and also one of the areas that we would encourage other stakeholders to support us with this. We want to engage voter educators, maybe in the district, to work with our stakeholders and also use the structure, provincial structures that are already there. Then we can work with them that they are more closer to the people so they can get the message right down to our community and our people. So that's our plan, that we would want the support from the government and also early resource those plans so we can collaborate and consult our stakeholders. We already have that, but we need to do a lot more consultation with our provincial officers and other CSO. From the past experience from 2007 to 2012, we used a lot of CSOs and it worked well until the past 2 elections. We decided not to use them, and that's where a lot of information were just not trickled down to our community and the people. So we would appeal that the partnership we want to have a whole of society approach for the support of the civic education program that we are planning to do.
And then within the 3-year plan that you're proposing, where do you see media and ICT support coming in for the civic awareness branch?
For the media support, I think they are part of our stakeholders and our partners. They are major partners that we would require them. We would also do capacity building with our partners, and it will be in our plans how we will work with them. We understand that we are going to use different channels and platforms that the media will help us to get this message on through civic education and other programs that we are planning to do.
And then in terms of IT, do you have any particular components that you're looking at? Are you looking at the online role again, or maybe other digital tools or social media campaigns? Are there any particular IT components that you're looking at in your 3-year plan?
We are looking at that, and also we need the support from our IT department to have those components. But for the online enrollment, that is something that needs to be done legally, because at the moment the law does not allow us for legal enrollment. So there are some legal issues and amendments that need to be done for us to get to use those ICT platforms for us to get those messages across. Those are some of the issues that also it's a challenge to us. We cannot do this because there are legalities that needs to be addressed and also need to be amended before we get the right information. And the information that goes out needs to be regulated as well. So those are some of the challenges, but I know if there's a way, there's a will, that we can do that through our support from those stakeholders and other agencies.
And in terms of the planning exercise, often for the Electoral Commission, it's perceived by the public sector as being a 5-year activity, so they only need a budget for one activity every 5 years, and maybe they're not prioritized for the intervening 4 years. And I think in a recent discussion where civil society was invited to give feedback to the medium-term development plan for the country, one of the concerns was that elections was not budgeted for on a 5-year basis. In terms of your planning and your 3-year plan, do you feel government counterparts understand the needs of the Electoral Commission when it comes to budgeting, or is it treated as an afterthought until the eve of any elections?
With the 3-year plan, although if the election is a 5-year plan, but I'm sure we can work around that to get other support from the other areas to get the support from for the 3-year plan. It can be done in the all-of approach where we can source support from other agencies for the 3-year plan. It depends on how we collaborate with the agencies.
And you mentioned the provincial support that you needed. I wanted to touch on that because it's not just an academic point. We also have the LLG elections coming up, and the same partners that we have on the panel this morning will be the ones that you'll be going to in terms of the LLG elections awareness. Do you have any immediate plans at this stage about what the LLG elections information is required to go out in terms of awareness, or is that something that is still being developed?
At the moment, it's being discussed and being developed, but for the LLG election, we're facilitating the process, but really the provincial affairs need to, we need to work with provincial affairs for the LLG election. For the information, at the moment, there is information that is worked on, and we're working closely with our operations, and they'll already start planning for the LLG election with the Department of Provincial Affairs. So at the moment, we're waiting for a response from the Provincial Affairs for us to draw up our plans for the LLG election. I understand that it will be around September, August next year.
Okay, I think for the journalists in the room, that's a headline there. So we're looking at elections for LLG in September or October next year. So that means that this is not a theoretical discussion that we have for the next 5 years, but the Papua New Guineans will be expecting to vote in the next 10 months, and they would expect information around that process to be communicated to them accurately, timely, and in an accessible manner. So these are very pressing concerns. I would like to come back to maybe Glenn. In your department, you have also a 5-year roadmap that's looking at digitization of key government infrastructure and making sure we move the information to the cloud and that all these processes work together. How does this 3-year plan align with your plans on the ICT side? Are you working with the Electoral Commission specifically for elections, or is it on a needs basis? When they have the need, they come to you? What's the programmatic approach that the department is taking on elections specifically?
Thank you. With regards to collaborating with other government departments, I think it's more of an effort between stakeholders, the highest stakeholders within those government departments and agencies to come at that level to allow us to engage. We've just had I just had a colleague from EC said that they'd like to work with Department of Provincial Affairs. We're already working with them, and they've moved their infrastructure into the cloud platform. They also have a plan to roll out to districts and to the provinces. They have a similar goal to what DICT has in terms of service delivery for government. As such, many other government departments and agencies have that same effort as well. So I think the thought of the collaborative effort to bringing service to our people in the rural areas and then across the country as well is already there. We just need collaboration and then probably the political will and from higher stakeholders to make it happen. For us to work together and delivering those is something that's doable. We've partnered with many government departments and key CACC agencies as well in many aspects as well. So I think partnering with EC and DPLJ to make that election work can happen, and it just needs a matter of coordination with the higher stakeholders to make it happen.
And how does this coordination normally work for the department? I know you have a new Digital Government Act, and it has requirements, for instance, for partnership arrangements or MOUs. What does that look like for key agencies? I know that the Electoral Commission is also an independent constitutional office, so is that treated differently from government agencies?
Yes, and we, in terms of partnerships, we've got a partnership team within our policy that's also looks into partnership with all stakeholders from different perspectives based on the mandates, based on the legal aspects of it as well. So they take care of all those partnership requirements. And we also have a technical wing as well that now puts in solutions to help deliver those solutions in terms of technology. So the support as well that we've received from a lot of globally branded ICT companies is there that we are leveraging on to utilize for digitizing other government departments, processes, and agencies. For example, DPLJ, in terms of their reach to the provinces, are now trialing out virtual desktops for people in the districts. And that is something that it's a trial at this point, but potentially it could evolve into a shared service for whole of government if it it works out well. So there's a lot of collaboration in terms of technology, but in terms of partnership, like I mentioned, we need that effort from all stakeholders at different levels to make it happen.
I think one of the key components in that partnership coordination is that when we talk about transparency, it's about dissemination of information, but information is also power. And so there's sometimes deliberate acts to withhold information so as to maintain power, and that's a discussion that we should also have. I think one of the key things about the Digital Government Act is it compels state agencies to give data to the Department of ICT and to centralize data. Are you going about doing that, and will you be requesting agencies to bring the data and give it to you for elections, but also for other purposes?
So within the Digital Government Act, there's already provisions for and gives mandate to the ICT to now host government data on the government infrastructure. We've also have discussion with key stakeholders that can make that happen. In terms of sharing the data, obviously we cannot share any data freely. Data has to be shared based on certain categories. What is required is for all stakeholders to agree on what kind of data to share. And there's already discussions and with different stakeholders into starting off with pilot projects to share data. Right now, we're at a stage where we're looking at evolving. Many of our government departments and agencies are still using legacy technology in their operations. So the challenge right now is to get them up to speed with modern technology, emerging technology, so that we can leverage on a lot of those capabilities in terms of delivering verified information securely to our people with one source of truth. As Neville has stated, that we need to plug those gaps right now. And I think the best way to do that is obviously through planning and learning from the lessons learned. We can utilize technology, appropriate technology, to plug those gaps, to make sure that we deliver information correctly through proper mediums. So that is something that I think the department can work with many stakeholders in delivering those important services to our people.
I think those open data requirements are also captured in the Digital Government Act, and there's accessibility for citizens to access this data. I think for us at TIPNG, it was interesting to hear the chairman of the parliamentary committee also express that he would like, for instance, the role to be open and accessible. Is there scope for that? Is it just a mere press of a button that the role can be made available online? Or does it fall within your criteria of sensitive data that has to be treated distinctively? How do you handle electoral data?
Again, it is collaboration with the Electoral Commission. They know what kind of data needs to be shared, and there's also legalities around, automation. Right now, there's no legal, sort of legislation in place to automate some processes. And then if there's a need to amend acts, amend policies, that should happen so that we can enable everyone to share data. If we can't have the legal basis to amend acts, we can move to the next phase of utilizing technology, which rightfully, like Alison said. So I think that effort needs to happen so that we start rolling down the path of utilizing technology.
And Neville, I'd like to come to you before I open to the floor for questions. And to those online, please feel free to ask questions as well. I think on that point of data and accessibility to data, one of the conversations that Media Council and TIPNG has had is on the need of Freedom of Information Act in Papua New Guinea as a way of empowering citizens to access public data in the public interest. For the media in 2022 national general elections, were requests for information well received? Were people forthcoming with data? And if not, for 2027, what kind of data does the media need to be able to report effectively on elections?
As I mentioned earlier, you are the most sensitive time, obviously, is polling and counting. Those times when real-time information is crucial to be disseminated. And as I also mentioned earlier, the key to having access to this is early partnership. I think if the lines of communication and vetting of information are clearly acknowledged and understood by everybody, all the stakeholders, I think that's key. One issue the media faced this time is more about safety and security outside of Port Moresby, outside of urban centers. That also comes back to having a clear acknowledgement of the role of the media, the role of journalists on the ground, and especially accredited journalists, not just anybody claiming to be a journalist or reporting for somebody, because we have unscrupulous people out there.
Now, to touch on that point of accreditation, is it PNGEC accreditation or is it Media Council accreditation you're referring to, or are they one and the same?
Well, if they're reporting for a mainstream media organization, obviously they're affiliated to the council, but I think the accreditation process is something that should be shared with PNGEC.
And the media personnel that reported in 2022, you mentioned that they faced some issues in terms of outside urban reporting. What were those issues? Was it accessibility or was it safety primarily?
I think it was safety because of inaccessibility to information. I think maybe there was some breakdown between communication between the PNGEC headquarters and provincial offices, especially during sensitive times like counting. In some areas, media personnel clearly identified were allowed access. In other areas, they were more restricted. I mean, each area has their own unique challenges in regards to, level of support, supporters, volatility, risk. So if there's early implementation, early partnership, most of these problems we won't see.
And then there was, I think, a mention by the chairman of the parliamentary committee yesterday that his scrutineers were not able to take their phones into counting venues. Did you see those same issues with the media, and how did you assist media personnel that were faced with requirements that they couldn't take in broadcast equipment or their phones into counting venues?
We did face those several circumstances in specific areas. So what we did was we used our back channels communications with the PNGEC through the commissioner, and most times Alice and the team helped us with that to send a message down that there are accredited media personnel. The issues of whether phones could be taken into counting centers, I think that was based on previous incidents of phones being used or being abused within counting centers. Early planning.
And I want to go into specifics on this early planning just so that we maybe have some key activities that we could consider. Is there maybe like a MOU that you require, or terms of reference, a guiding document? Is it something that the Media Council needs to do, like a standard for reporting during elections? How does that partnership look like ideally? Do you have any thoughts on that?
Well, each media organization, mainstream media or newsroom, has their own elections planning. I mean, they have their own schedules to follow when it comes to planning for elections. That also includes reporting in uncontrolled situations, mainly around elections or any volatile situation. But I think to merge that into the plans that the PNGEC has for the next elections, I think is key. And obviously an MOU of some sort between the PNGEC and the Media Council and its members would be desirable.
And then just to go very specific, you mentioned that each newsroom would have its own plan, and I guess they would have their own contact with the Electoral Commission as well. Across the media landscape, are there commonalities that each media outlet as a basic when they're reporting in elections does require? And would we be able to say, like, these are the 3 or so requirements that our media need to have in order to be able to report effectively, from the Electoral Commission?
Sure. I think the main one is safety and security, and this comes down to partnerships with our stakeholders. So when journalists go into either an uncontrolled situation or potentially uncontrollable situation, they first establish rapport with the law and justice authorities on the ground, the police, the CS officers are involved. Once that rapport is established, then that's where they go to. But there should be a formal acknowledgement of that process, and I think that's where an MOU with the PNGC would fix that.
Thank you. I think we've had lively discussion, a lot of varied perspectives on the issue of how information can go out and empower voters in Papua New Guinea. I'd like to open the floor for questions in the room and also online. If you want to ask a question, if you could just raise your hand, please state your name and ask your question. I'd ask you to keep it to a question. We have mics on the floor, so they'll come to you for the questions. Okay, I have a hand here.
Good morning all. My name is Michael Varpik and I represent the Catholic Professional Society. My question is directed to a representative from the Electoral Commission, but the other panelists can also chip in. Judging from yesterday's discussion and from the media, the common role that was used for the 2022 national general election was not complete in the sense that it was not up to date, and there were issues on that. Now, we are encouraged. My question was, what can you do differently to ensure that the common role is updated for the 2027 national general election? And I'm encouraged by the fact that you have touched on a number of strategies, a number of initiatives that you will apply, or the Commission will apply, to ensure that the common role is updated. But I'm looking for some specifics. What can you do differently to ensure that the common role is updated? That's one. The second question is about managing the common role. And managing the common role happens at the polling place on polling day. That's where the problem is. There are stories abound that people turn up to vote, but when they go and check their names have been ticked off, somebody has voted on their names. That is a corruption of the electoral roll, and that needs to be managed as well. Thank you.
Okay, I take that question. I think I'll just take one more if there's another question before I go to the panel. Any other questions from the floor? Questions? If not, one question there at the front.
Thank you, moderator. My name is Henry Amo. I'm from CIMC. My question also is to the representative of the PNGC. This is regarding, the 3 plan that is proposed for the awareness going forward, and then Looking at the current scenario, especially up in the islands, when it comes to elections, people say that time block KK. That's the current trend up in the islands. Through the awareness strategy in the 3 years strategy that you want to put together, how do you expect to change that perception of time block KK? Thank you.
Okay, thank you for those two questions. I note that they both are directed to Alice from PNGEC, but obviously, panelists, if you'd like to comment on them. So the first question from Michael is, what will you do differently regarding issues on the role so that it can be updated? He also mentioned when the role is mismanaged, it leads to corruption. And we had a question from Henry about the public perception that elections and time block KK. How do we engage with the public to change that perception? And panelists, if you want to also add in, feel free to.
Thank you. For the question on specifics on the common role, that question I'm unable to answer it right now because I'm not directly involved in managing that. I support the work of the administration, which they need to come with specific areas where they want me to inform the public. Then I do that, but at the moment, I think it's still in discussion, and I'm unable to give you specific information on that and how that can be managed.
Second question is perception of time re-election and time block KK. How do we engage with public perceptions on elections?
Thank you. That's a good question, and at the moment it's a big challenge for us. We need to work closely with our provincial office, and well, this is kind of question. Like right now, we plan on Savea. There are people that comes in with different intention, knowing that it's election time na plenty money got money where time block kai. So maybe one of our plans is to change the behavior of our citizens during the elections and make them understand that whatever they are benefiting from is not the right thing that they should be doing. And that's where I mentioned civic education comes in. We need to educate our people on their rights and the system. What do we do to address those issues? What do we do to change the behavior of people to do the right thing? So that's what I can respond. But time block kai is something that we cannot maybe say that it won't happen, but we will just work around what we have and the information and the data that we got from one of our stakeholders with the survey that was conducted in parts of the highlands that we will put in our plan how to address that. It's to do with the behavior of our voters during the election and during the polling that can be changed. If we see some little changes, I know that something better will be done with our stakeholders and collaboratively with the communities that we have.
Thank you, Alice. And as introduced, Alice is the director for the Information and Civic Awareness branch. So the role has its own branch within the department, within the Electoral Commission, likewise with the IT systems and the other processes. There's a legal division that looks at legislative change. So as Alice mentioned in her introductory remarks, her role is really to look at the awareness pre-elections primarily, but also during the elections and post-elections. So that's where her main scope of work is focused on. I think that question from Michael is also an important question, and maybe the ICT you can chip in on. are there any things that we could do differently? You know, we don't have to aim to be like Lithuania maybe and have everything all at the press of a button. But are there any realistic steps that we could look at, and how can digital technology assist the conduct of elections? And he mentioned specifically at the roll process.
So I think there's already a call to deliver an electronic voting system for the next elections. And as part of that process as well, you've got to look at the entire process of voter registration all the way through, you know, right up to the booth. How do you vote? And then basically, if we fix some of those issues, that will deal with that second question of Kaikeman Pasina. A lot of voters basically, and we've seen that they vote because, you know, they get paid some money to vote for whoever they need to vote for. So having procedures or systems in place that would eliminate some of those processes where, example, you know, you validate that you've already voted and your data that you check online is similar to the one that's printed on the common roll book, then if we tie a lot of those data together, have one source of truth, then it eliminates a lot of issues, I think, social issues as well. So there's discussion going on right now. I think that will be finalized in due course, and appropriate discussions we will have in terms of the technicalities of delivering that project with obviously different stakeholders, including EC as well. But there's already a call for that, and discussions are happening as we speak.
Okay, and just to maybe push you on that, has the department considered, and there have been recommendations from others around biometric voting, and I think from NRI yesterday as well on e-voting. Has there been any preliminary work done by the department, or is this still?
Like I mentioned, there's discussions going on. There's other aspects of it that we need to look into in terms of the legalities of utilizing biometrics as well, and the other stuff. But in terms of the technology aspect of it, that's doable, and that's something that some of the things that we've worked with other stakeholders in terms of utilizing similar technology in their internal processes as well. So some of those technology we can utilize with the e-voting system, I believe. So if there's a legal or policy agendas that we need to you know, have clearance for and then fix up, I think that will happen as part of the process of delivering on the e-voting system for government.
Thank you. And to Mavis and Neville, I don't want to lose Henry's question as well. I think reforming elections is a big problem, and then behavioral change seems to be an even bigger problem. So how does civil society and the media maybe engage in that exercise of behavioral change?
I think I'll go to Henry's question first. It's certainly the expression we faced, our teams had all throughout the country. For us, the simple answer is get rid of the DSIP. I think that's what's given rise to all of these behavioral problems and mentality that people have. So that's certainly one of that's been coming up in our public consultations on the effects, the disadvantages of the DSIPs and what it's causing, the mentality that people have around that. And going to Michael's question about
what can be done differently?
Yeah, what can be done differently? I think from our consultations, we've also heard about the importance of the NID. We believe that, you know, it may be an expensive exercise initially, but it could be a long-term, you know, solution for us. So within NID, everyone issued NID cards. There won't be any need for the voter roll. Show up with your NID card and vote through whatever means that that are being proposed. So invest in it. It may be significant, but in the long run, you will realize there will be savings on that. And it does away with all of these discrepancies in the rolls. Updating the roll every year, every 5 years is a long process. It's very costly. And do you want to keep doing that every 5 years? So it is certainly a recommendation we are putting forward to the special parliamentary.
I'm going to push you as well, Mavis, because I think on behavioral change, we can't just push it to the SIP. As a representative of faith-based organizations, what can faith-based organizations do to create behavioral change? And what if, churches and church-like groups organized in the 2022 elections, and what can we do for 2027 to address the question from Henry?
Yeah, so Caritas PNG, one of our core business is integral human development, which is all about behavioral change. So working with communities, individuals first, and then the community at large. And that's helping people to understand their worth as human beings, what skills and knowledge they possess, and how they can utilize that to enable themselves to become better people. We've done this voter education program so many times. We go and give good messages to our people, but every time a candidate passes through the community, mindsets change. So whilst we continue to do advocacy and awareness, we work with individuals in certain communities to promote integral human development and hopefully change perceptions and mindsets. One key area or target area that we work with are the youth. And in our last voter education program, we were really fortunate to engage the political science students from UPNG, the environmental students at UNRE, and the Divine Word students who helped us with our voter education. We believe in youth potential and their capabilities in helping us drive our messages across to their peers, not just their peers, but their parents, their communities back home. So whilst us and the civil society, I think, I know for sure, because I've seen some students also engaged by the PNG Electoral Commission, the political parties themselves too. I mean, most of them wait until the eve of elections and then, start mobilizing the young people and using them for their self-interest, self-benefit. But have some concrete plans and programs and initiatives in place to educate, empower, and develop young people also to be responsible citizens. I think to just use our young people for political gains and benefits is just unjust, and it's not proper. And it is what they value. If young people are engaged in such practices or in support of candidates and members of parliament in that regard, then you are being valued as worthless. Realize that you have been used, and you're building someone's interests and not helping yourself, and ensuring that a prosperous community as a result of your actions.
And I'll go to Neville as well on that same question. How do we engage in behavioral change? What's the role of the media in getting rid of the election sometime look like TIPNG? Or maybe not behavioral change, but integral human development, as Mavis alluded to. What is the role of media in correcting the community perceptions?
Thanks, Hugh. I think with regards to doing away with what Henry has asked about and the time Lukekai syndrome, I think that's a holistic approach by everybody. Best way I can paint a picture about that is when I went to vote at Gordon's police station, or Gordon's barracks field. That was chaotic. So what I saw there was groups of young men who obviously have political candidate affiliation, trying to create unrest and dissension amongst people lining up to vote. But there was also pushback from, clear-thinking people, actually genuine voters who were there to vote. So there is that pushback. I think what we need to do is strengthen that in everything we do. I mean, we try to do that in the media every day with our stories, so I think coverage is key. And I think all the newsrooms acknowledge that also. Because if you educate the public as to why they have this right or qualified right to vote. It's the only right that can't be taken away from them. If you emphasize the importance of that fact, then maybe there will be some change. I'm optimistic that there will be. To answer Michael's question about what we can probably do, I think we can all acknowledge that in these past elections, the role of how we appoint our counting officials or members of the public service who are seconded to come in to the electoral process to provide support. I think we saw it in NCD various times. And although the PNG-EC might have their own integrity processes to do this registration, we know that they were under a lot of time pressures, a lot of resource pressures. But I think that that's one area that can be cleaned up before the next elections, and with the help of new technology and innovation that Glenn has mentioned, it's positive, and I think we can get there if we just remain committed to it.
Thank you. I'm mindful of time, but I'd like to still take more questions from the floor. So if anyone has a question, if you could, I have to go to people that haven't asked questions just to get variety in the questions, so with your apologies. Yeah, I prefer to the moderation from this side, but I'm also glad for the contributions from colleagues in the room, so I'll defer to you, Michael.
I think an important panelist is missing from the team up there, and that's security. Security is key to a successful election, because we hear stories about ballot boxes being hijacked, ballot boxes being tampered with.
I'll just jump in there. So this is the transparency panel. We do have an integrity panel, and we do have a representative from security to also speak to those issues.
Are they here?
No, they'll be for the afternoon panel. It's
okay.
2 panels today.
Then I'll
so
wait.
I would ask you to retain your question for the security personnel
I'll wait, because
in the
it's
afternoon.
key, it's
yes,
important.
it is. So this panel, again, to remind those in the room and those watching, is to do with transparency of information. So the panelists that have chosen are not to speak about security issues or the integrity application of the rule of law. We will have that discussion today. It's an important discussion. But before we can have the rules that have to be followed, people have to be made aware of the rules. So it's important to have the information to go out so that we can expect accountability. So that's why transparency is important. So I'd like to, please, if we could take questions to the topic of transparency. What are the challenges in getting information out? Who needs to provide that information? What information has been lacking so that we can inform the outcome of this seminar? So do we have any questions to the topic on transparency and dissemination of information? Yep, we have a question in front here.
Thank you. My name is Velosa. I'm with the Voice Corporation, and I was one of the observers that took part in the TIPNG National General Elections observation. My question is to the civil society. Do you include, you mentioned that you do awareness, so do you include the awareness on national goals and directive principles also inside with the Constitution? Thank you.
Yes, we do. So for our voter education program, we developed some materials, booklets, and posters on various themes. Our booklets contained the 5 national goals and directive principles, and the first one is integral human development.
Yeah. Thank you, Velosa, for that question. We have another question at the back there. If you could say your name, the organization, and your question.
Thank you. My name is Jason. I'm with the Expose Youth Magazine. My question is, it's to do with the, well, I have two things to point out. One is to do with the involvement of youths in the election and the election process and awareness engagements during counting, polling, and the election cycle. I see there tends to be more, probably because of funding reasons and stuff, but more public servants being engaged. And we want to, we're talking about behavioral change. We want to influence the change in behavior of mindsets. I'm making a point that we should have more youths involved at the start as well, and especially in schools and the young ones coming up. We had a 58% increase, I think, in the enrollment of youths 18 to 24 years old. That's a big area that we can sort of make use of. Now to my other specific question is to do with the involvement of people living with disabilities. Those who cannot get the information very clearly. We're not involving them or getting that information out, like, for example, on NBC or MTV. You have people translating so that they can understand. I'm making a point that we should have them in the discussions and in our awareness in whatever we do with the media, the civil society, and the Electoral Commission. Thank you.
Thank you, Jason, for that comment. And I think it's 2 comments, but I'll maybe turn them into questions and just ask the panelists, maybe starting with Alice, how do you envision, how have you worked with the young people and persons living with disability in civic awareness previously, and how do you plan to do so in future? So young people in civic awareness and persons living with disability, how does your branch engage with them?
Thank you, Jason. Working with the persons with disability, in the past and current, we've worked with some of them in the election process. We've also engaged them in the enrollment exercise and also the recruitment. But the challenge is we have interpreters that we have, and also they have their own tools that we need to utilize for them to communicate with them. Also, the involvement in the electoral process. We've also engaged them, but the challenge now is for them to further educate their other colleagues who are in the same group. That's a big challenge. Although we've engaged them, but we do not have any data if there are other persons with that specific needs that are also involved. But we do have provincial officers who work with Kalan services to also educate them in that electoral process. Some of them may have involved in terms of being a polling official and other counting, but we need to really know and maybe visualize them that they are there and participate in the electoral process. But we do work with them. We have partners that collaborate with us, and also they're in our network not really addressing, but working with them to educate them. And I think one of our plans and is cross-cutting issues and inclusive election, which those people need to be part of the electoral process.
I think also to Jason's question, I'll add a supplementary in terms of role update and enrollment of first-time and young voters. Do you have any specific plans for the coming elections in terms of how do we enroll young voters?
Young voters, you mean
first time, those will be turning 18 by the next election.
For the young voters, we have the civic education where we need to educate our young voters on their rights to enroll and as a citizen of this country. And our plan is to engage a lot of youths. We've worked with youth groups, and our focus, we've started this election, but we need to do a lot of awareness to educate our young youths There's a lot of them that are not on the roll, and we need to engage with other groups who working with the youths to get them involved and participate. We want to empower them to see their value as the citizen of this country and the involvement in the electoral process. So we have this civic education where we want to visit institutions and the schools because we believe that there are young people who need to understand and know about the electoral process.
Okay. Thank you. I'd like to, before I come to the other panelists, I'm mindful of time. Are there any other pressing questions from the floor? I think we have one in the front. If you could say your name, organization, and direct your question. And the microphone will be brought to you. So if you could put your hand up again.
Good morning, all. My name is Travis Allison. I'm with the UPNG batch. My question is directed to Stephen and Alice. The NID has been a reoccurring topic in the recent years. However, present day, it has faded away. Considering your respective initiatives to collect citizen data for the purpose of renewing and maintaining the common role, my question is, does the NID have any relevance in these processes, considering that the NID actually has extensive data of many citizens, considering, I mean, they have our fingerprints and fingerprints that would be in great use for the biometric systems that you plan to introduce into our systems. Yeah.
Okay, thank you for that question. It's a very relevant question. So as part of delivering the digital government agendas for government, one of the key components of that is digital identity for all citizens. Digital identity is key in delivering a lot of key services for government. And one aspect of utilizing digital ID is obviously with elections. But we could utilize that for the health sector as well, and many other examples we could use. So right now, I think there's a very big need to collaborate with NID, and there's discussions going on right now to collaborate with them in terms of developing solutions, developing the national digital ID, so that we can utilize it with events like the elections and then the census and the likes. So discussions has been ongoing for some time now, and then there's some projects and that we're working on as well, and then hopefully we translate that into delivering on the e-government, the e-voting system that government has already made mention to. So that's something that that's work in progress at the moment.
Thank you. I think I had the same response as well. Before the election, there was several consultation with NID and the policy section of the Electoral Commission, and maybe the election just came around when we decided to park that, and I know it will continue with the consultation with the NID. I understand there were a pilot on the NID somewhere in the islands province in the previous government, and that needs to continue with our team with the ICT.
Okay. I'm mindful that it's 11:30 and we started on time, and I'm expecting to finish on time as well. I can see hands going up, and I'm assured that our panelists will be with us at least for the tea break, if not for the next session as well. They're also very much publicly available. They're transparent in their conduct as well, so I'm sure you can reach them if you have any follow-up questions regarding any of the points that they've mentioned. In summation, I think it was a very enlightening panel discussion, and we're grateful for each of the panelists. We had first from Alice speaking about the work of the Electoral Commission in getting information out and to make sure that people were informed of some of the key processes. I think for Mavis, it was really making sure that the information got out to the people that needed it, not just on elections, about good governance, about how money is spent, about the process of how the citizens engage in that integral human development. In order for the information to go out, there were some key processes that we needed to also look at. And we heard from Glenn about what the Department of ICT is looking at in terms of possible actions and some of the lessons that they've learned. I think the key feedback that we had across from all panelists was there has to be early engagement and there has to be early start in collaboration. This was a point that Neville stressed in his remarks from the Media Council about the media engagement and maybe some of the key partnerships that have to be in place for the media to be able to get access to data, to disseminate it, and to be that authenticating and verification role that they could play in the elections process, particularly for counting, he mentioned. This was something that Glenn also touched on, the verification of information and ensuring that those partnerships were in place so that data that could be accessed easily and to be shared for the purposes of elections delivery. I think we all agreed on some of the issues that we had discussed yesterday in day one as well, particularly on the role update processes. And then we also had discussions yesterday and today about public perceptions and how we engage in the public perceptions of the elections themselves and some of the corrupt conduct that comes out of it. I think there were also some specific interventions around the role itself and how it could be improved, and also some of the tools like the NID. Personally, I was grateful for the question on the Constitution and integral human development. I think it's important to also underline why elections are important. It's not an exercise just to be able to complete and report on, but it's actually a renewal of our democratic principles as a country. So thank you for raising that question from one of our observers in TIPNG, and thank you for collecting data for the report that was launched yesterday. So again, all this information from the panel and from the reports and presentations yesterday are available online, and we also have our hashtag, so please do post about this event. But as we close off of the event, I'd like to ask you to join me in thanking the panelists, and I'll ask them to remain on stage for a group photo before the MC comes and tells us our next component for the program. So please join me in thanking our panelists. And I'll ask if you can stand. If you have a copy of the report, we'll just take a group photo of our panelists before they leave the stage.
Thank you to our distinguished panelists.